How to cure type 2 diabetes. Just for the record, type 1 diabetes is genetic and can't be cured. But type 2 diabetes, despite what doctors or researchers suggest that it can't be cured and once you have it, you can't get rid of it, that's just because people who with type 2 diabetes, like no one's ever reversed it. That doesn't mean it can't be reversed because it's caused by your environment and things that you do that will make you diabetic. So with that logic, it's also reversible with your environment. Okay, and I've figured it out. So I'm going to tell you everything in this video. It's going to be a long video, but if you're willing to watch to the end, you also understand how to reverse type 2 diabetes and become healthy again. Alright? This is real, by the way. This is not like some bullshit that I made up. Everything in here is scientifically backed as well. It's just not been tested scientifically. My theory, alright? So, the first thing, the foundation is understanding the 3 types of fatty acids in our diet, okay? Now, you might not understand where I'm going right now, but you will eventually, okay? So, saturated fat, monounsaturated fat, polyunsaturated fat. All you need to know, to keep it simple, is that polyunsaturated fat, we have not evolved to consume high amounts of. The only amount was from fish and eggs, and it was usually omega-3, DHA, and EPA, okay? That's it. Anything that isn't a DHA or EPA is basically unhealthy, and we didn't evolve, like our body physically wasn't made to consume that, alright? So that's the preface. Now, essentially, the difference between polyunsaturated, PUFAs, and MUFAs and SFAs, so saturated and monounsaturated, is that polyunsaturated fat is far easier to get oxidized. Why? Because the molecular structure of different fats is basically saturated fat. The whole fat is the carbon backbone is bonded with hydrogen molecules. Every single carbon is bonded to hydrogen, alright? So that's fully saturated with hydrogen. Monounsaturated just has one unsaturated bond, which means that somewhere in the fat there's 2 carbons that are double bonded. So a double bond is when they're like both connected to each other or something. Basically, that is like a weak point where oxygen or free radicals per se can oxidize that molecule and react with it, which creates toxic compounds. Polyunsaturated fat has got several unsaturated bonds in the chain of fat, okay? Whereas monounsaturated's only got 1, and then saturated's got none. So basically, this is also how fluid they are. So basically, saturated fat, if you've looked at coconut oil, it's solid at room temperature until you heat it up and melt it, alright? Whereas olive oil is runny, and then if you get canola oil or vegetable oil, it's really runny, and you could put it in the fridge and it would still be runny, even at cold temperatures, alright? And that's because these bonds create like a bend in the fat, like it's bent, and that makes it take up more space. It doesn't get as compact, so it doesn't stick together as much. It's less dense. It basically takes up more space, making it more fluid, alright? So that's to do with its structure. And the properties to do with how it oxidizes. When it oxidizes, so oxygen in the double bond can, because there's no hydrogen, it can come in and react with the carbon and break the double bond, and this creates lipid peroxides. So polyunsaturated fat is unstable and it creates lipid peroxides when oxidized. When you eat this in your body, basically all of your cells in your body have a cellular membrane and a mitochondrial membrane. So the mitochondria produces energy inside of the cell, and they both have membranes, which is like the barrier around it, okay? And what makes up the barrier? Normally, it would be saturated fat and cholesterol and um, phospholipids, which is like phosphorus and fat combined together and stuff like that. That's what normally will be in our cell membranes and mitochondrial membranes. When you consume too much polyunsaturated fat, you basically store it both in your fat cells, but more in your cell membranes in every cell. And first of all, this makes it more permeable, because if you can imagine, saturated fat is really dense, it packs tightly, all right? Because it's a straight line, so they pack in together. Whereas these bent fats, like the polyunsaturated fat, they bend, they take up too much space, they're less dense, and it makes them more permeable, for one. And then it also oxidizes really easily. So if there's any oxygen, free oxygen around, or any reactive oxygen species and such, this oxidizes with it and creates more compounds that are unstable and free radicals, reactive oxygen species. When we talk about like inflammation and stuff, this is part of it, all right? You're inflamed, well, you're usually full of reactive oxygen species, all right? So this means that when you accumulate all the, say you're eating chips and stuff like, so like the reason that people nowadays have it versus in the past is because all of our food now is made with vegetable oil and canola oil and so on. Like KFC, any restaurants, believe me, any restaurants, they cook in vegetable oil or seed oils, everything, even healthy food like eggs, bacon and eggs, fucking fish and chips, everything is deep fried in oil or it's fried in oil. Even muffins and cakes, the recipes, if you look up any like standard birthday cake recipe, it'll have, of course, flour, cocoa powder, sugar, but it'll have a huge amount of vegetable oil, all right? Like, I work at a cafe. I know what they use because I've made muffins on several occasions there, all right? And the recipe usually contains a moderate amount of vegetable oil, which could be canola oil, could be soybean oil, rice bran oil, wheat germ oil, corn oil. Like the list really does go on. There's heaps of different seed oils, okay? That's the best way to describe them because they usually come from seeds. And they're really cheap, and they really only started getting made after like World War II. That's when we started using them. Okay? Like, for example, canola oil, that actually used to be like engine oil. They used to use that in the engines of vehicles, but once World War II was over, they didn't really have anything to use it for, so they just decided they're gonna sell it to people to eat and cook with. Okay, so anyway, that's a side point. That's why nowadays everyone has got so much polyunsaturated fat in them, and in the past we didn't have that. Okay, so that's a key point. That's what's different today than it was hundreds of years ago, thousands of years ago, tens of thousands of years ago. That's the key difference, all right? Because diabetes was practically non-existent before World War II and so on, especially nowadays, like modern era, after the 2000s, that's when it's really shot up, okay? So basically, you have accumulated all of these polyunsaturated fats into your body, and in your mitochondria, you produce energy for your cells. You produce ATP. So your mitochondria produces energy, ATP, but your mitochondrial membranes are full of these really fluid and unstable fatty acids instead of the normal phospholipids, cholesterol, and such. This means that basically the electron, you know about the electron transport chain. It basically, the way in which you make ATP involves an electron transport chain. So I don't fully understand like the physics of it or whatever, but basically what you need is the electrons to move around. And when the membrane's weak, the electrons leak out of the membrane. And that reduces the amount of ATP you end up producing. So basically the efficiency of your mitochondria goes down. Now at the same time, your mitochondrial membranes are getting oxidized. All right, and they produce, when they're full of polyunsaturated fat, they produce reactive oxygen species and free radicals. All right, so these reactive oxygen species physically damage the insulin receptor. Okay, and insulin's really important here because insulin is what tells your cells, especially your muscle and liver cells, but also the other cells that listen to insulin, it tells them that they need to absorb glucose. All right, it tells them to absorb glucose, and the reactive oxygen species being produced damage the insulin receptor in the cell membrane, which inhibits its function. So that means your cells will stop being able to absorb glucose. This also blocks GLUT4, which is like a pathway that helps absorb glucose as well. So basically, you damage the insulin receptor and you block GLUT4 function, which means you can't absorb really any glucose into the cell. So this is essentially what insulin resistance is. However, simultaneously, this actually makes your fat cells more sensitive to insulin because the cell membrane is more permeable. And look, because fat cells aren't that metabolically active, they don't use that much energy because they store energy. And this means that basically fat cells get more sensitive to insulin for a while, and they start absorbing all the excess glucose that isn't being absorbed by your muscles because they can't. They're resistant to insulin. Same with your liver. And they're normally, those two, your liver and muscles, usually would absorb the most amount of the glucose from your body, from your bloodstream, okay? But now that they're no longer functioning normally, this means that basically your fat cells become more sensitive to insulin and they have to buffer and absorb all of the glucose. When you're insulin resistant, this is where you become obese because all of the sugar that you're eating and even just normal carbs is going into your bloodstream and being absorbed almost exclusively by your fat cells. Okay, so this is then you become obese during insulin resistance and you store heaps of body fat. Okay, because fat cells are the only cell listening to insulin. All right, and when this happens, your body produces, your blood sugar is obviously higher because your fat cells are the only one absorbing it. All right, like I've said, that means that you're not absorbing as much as you normally would, so it takes longer for it to come down. Your blood insulin production, like your insulin levels, are higher than normal. If you were sensitive to insulin, they would be quite low because you don't need much. But now that you're resistant, your insulin is higher all the time. This, first of all, prevents fat burning, and it also encourages storage of fat. Like it activates enzymes that store fat, okay? Lipoprotein lipase, LPL. So this means you're storing heaps of fat and your insulin's always elevated, even when you're not eating food. So this is your fasting insulin, okay? But even when you eat food, say you eat like, I don't know, anything, just any food, your insulin will be higher than a normal person, okay? Because you're resistant to it. Now, this can go on for years. You'll just get fatter and fatter and fatter and you won't know why. Oh, it's just genetics. Oh, I've just got a slow metabolism, blah, 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 whatever. And then eventually you got to understand, your fat cells have a limit to how much fat they can actually store. Like, and look, the limit's big. They can get pretty fucking big. All right, they can store a lot, but there is a limit. And when you keep pushing that, eventually the reactive oxygen species, the polyunsaturated fats, and all the, once they've reached their capacity, they too start resisting insulin. And what do you think happens when the only cell, your adipocytes, your fat cells, the only cell that was absorbing the glucose in your blood, what do you think happens when they stop absorbing the glucose? Because they can't absorb anymore. They're resistant to insulin too now. Well, that, my friend, is diabetes. Because now your blood sugar goes super high because nothing's absorbing it. All right? It just stays high all the time. And your pancreas can't produce enough insulin to actually store any of it because none of the cells are listening. They're literally ignoring it because the receptor isn't working, all right? You're 100% resistant to insulin. So your fat cells continue listening for years, right? They have a huge buffer, but the thing is, eventually you're going to get so fat that they can't keep going, all right? There is a limit, and when they break that limit, then that's the chaos of diabetes, all right? This is diabetes, all right? So I hope the whole part that you just watched, I know it's long, probably boring or something, but now you understand how you got diabetes, or how people get diabetes, whether you're diabetic or not, all right? This is how you get diabetes, okay? And what doctors do is they tell you to do walking, do like low intensity exercise, eat more fiber. That's one I've heard. Eat more fiber because it lowers the blood sugar spike. And also, they give them drugs. One is insulin. So they literally inject insulin because your pancreas, right? When your pancreas is being forced to produce so much insulin that it's like, because your blood sugar is so high, it's trying its best to actually sequester the glucose and stabilize your blood sugar, but it can't. It physically can't. It burns out and then it stops working and they have to inject insulin. But do you think injecting insulin is going to fix the problem? No. Okay, that's one. Do you think eating fiber is going to fix diabetes now? No, it won't. Why would fiber fix this? Right? Fiber just slows the rate of digestion in your stomach. All right? It reduces the amount of fat. It reduces the amount of carbs that you end up absorbing at once. You still absorb pretty much all the carbs. It just reduces the speed at which you absorb carbs. So once again, that's not going to help you. And then the last thing is Ozempic. That's a drug that has come out over the last few years, and they basically inject that to reduce appetite. They think that if you just ate less food, then you're going to, that'll help your blood sugar or some shit. Like, that's not going to solve anything as well. And it's a scam. It's a fucking ripoff because you're not solving any problems because it's uncurable. And basically, just eating less food isn't going to save you, alright? You'll just lose muscle mass. And if you want to know why you would just lose muscle mass, watch my other videos. I've already explained this. I don't really want to waste your time and go over it again. Feel free to learn more on those other videos, alright? But what I will say briefly, just to help you understand, your muscle cells are resistant to insulin. So if they're not absorbing any glucose and then you stop eating as much food, do you think, what do you expect's gonna happen? You're just gonna lose all your muscle, right? So that's one point. It goes more than that. It's not that simple. There's other factors, but like I said, I'm not gonna get into it. So basically, they inject Ozempic or insulin, and they tell you to eat more fiber and like shit like that. Yeah, and like prebiotic foods and probiotics and stuff, like eat more yogurt. Like, do you think that's gonna solve any diabetes? Alright, and by the way, the reason I know this is because two of my grandparents have diabetes, and this is what they do. The doctor gives them Ozempic, and this is what they tell them. They tell them to eat fiber and like, to like shit like this. Like, this is not going to save them. I know that. And they won't listen to me because I'm just a teenager and I don't know what I'm talking about, blah, blah, blah. It pisses me off too, alright? But yes, so now, how do you solve diabetes, alright? Because I've taken great effort to tell you how people get diabetes. Now, how do you solve it? Well, you see, the problem is the insulin resistance. How do you get insulin resistance? Well, like we've said, polyunsaturated fats. Essentially, look, we could talk about reactive oxygen species and shit like that, but at the core of it, what's making that happen? Polyunsaturated fat. Okay? Now, how do you get rid of polyunsaturated fat? Well, the very simple answer is fasting. Because if you continue eating food, any food, even if it's got low carbs or low fat or whatever, you're still eating food. You're not giving your body a strong enough stimulus to break down its own fat reserves and use that for energy. The only way to reliably do that is through fasting, high intensity exercise, not just cardio, not jogging, not walking, but high intensity, like heavy weightlifting, like deadlifts, squats, bench press, whatever, and sprinting. Those two types of exercise is essentially just intense, high effort exercise and fasting. And there's other things like cold exposure and sunlight and, like eating high amounts of protein and fat and nutrients to help nourish your body. But essentially, what you have to do is fast and do sprinting. Why? Because when you go into fasting, there's a lot of things that happen actually, but one of the things that will happen is you increase autophagy. So the damaged mitochondria and the damaged cells get cleaned up by your immune system. They break them down and they reuse the nutrients and such in the cells, and they basically build new cells. Well, not really, you just break down all the old damaged cells. So that's one thing. Secondly, you increase your own antioxidant systems, alright? Like glutathione, for example. You basically stop, like you deoxidize like the reactive oxygen species. So basically the amount of inflammation in your body will come down more. Eventually you'll enter ketosis after about 24 hours or so. And when you enter ketosis, you've got to understand that ketones made from body fat are anti-inflammatory and they basically reduce oxidative stress in your body, okay? Unlike glucose. And so that means that you have less reactive oxygen species and you will clean up damaged cells, alright? That's one thing that happens during fasting, but really the big key thing is once you're in like ketosis and once your insulin comes down from not eating and your glycogen is depleted, you're only burning fat for energy. So basically, these polyunsaturated fats can be burned for energy. Although it's inefficient and although it does create reactive oxygen species, the thing is when you're fasted, your cells, your whole body has a better system for dealing with the reactive oxygen species, but you can use the polyunsaturated fat for energy. So you will end up burning them all and excreting them. once you've created ATP, once you've used all of the fat for energy, basically it gets converted from carbon and hydrogen, which is what most of it is. It gets converted into hydrogen and oxygen, so water, H2O, and carbon dioxide, which is CO2. So oxygen from your breath goes into your mitochondria essentially, and is used to combust the fat, all right? So you produce water and carbon dioxide, and then that's it, all right? If you do this, say you fast for 4 days at a time, and then one day you break your fast and you eat high protein and high fat, but saturated fat and monounsaturated fat. So say you eat steak, eggs, cheese, fish even, meat, organs, all right? All these foods have got high amounts of nutrients, micronutrients like minerals, vitamins, like every single mineral, every vitamin is in these foods, like organ meats like liver and such, fish, eggs, meat, cheese. So if you eat that, you're getting more than enough nutrients. You're getting saturated fat to like replace your cell membranes, so you can and cholesterol will also help replace the cell membranes so that you're not got polyunsaturated fat in them. All right, you'll be burning when you're fasted, all right, especially later on, you'll be burning almost exclusively body fat for energy, no muscle mass. Why? Because when you do fasting, your growth hormone comes up. Growth hormone is essentially a hormone that has a very strong activation of HSL and ATGL, which are two enzymes that break down body fat, okay? So it favors body fat burning for energy, and it also savors muscle mass, all right? It's anti-catabolic, right? It prevents muscle breakdown. It's protein sparing. Protein sparing meaning that it spares protein and it prevents it from breaking down. All right, so when your growth hormone is high, you will not be burning any body fat. And when I say your growth hormone is high, it's about 20 times higher than what it normally is. All right, 10 to 20 times. Okay, so your body's producing ridiculously high amounts of growth hormone. This is stimulating fat burning to an extreme level, and it's preventing any body fat, any muscle from breaking down. Okay, and then not to mention catecholamines like adrenaline, for example, are raised. Adrenaline is easily the strongest stimulator of body fat burning, all right? It makes you burn fat for energy very strongly, okay? So during fasting, your insulin is rock bottom. That means that you can burn fat because your blood insulin level has to be like below, I think, 5 nano units per milliliter, I think, is the number. I don't remember the measurement exactly. It's like micro units per milliliter, 5 micro units per milliliter. It has to be below that threshold, and the only way to get that is in fasting. If you eat any food, no matter what, you'll be above 5. You can burn a little bit of fat between 5 and 10, but it's inefficient. You're not going to be burning that much. You'll be burning more glucose, all right? So essentially, in fasting, you're burning only fat for energy. Over time, you can burn through the polyunsaturated fat. When you refeed, if you eat protein and fat, no carbs, all right? You don't want to be activating insulin too much because your body is resistant to insulin still. It's going to take ages. It's going to take, like, depending on how fat you are, it's going to take fucking 6 to 12 months minimum. All right, I mean, maybe less, because this is very efficient. This is like the fastest you could biologically burn fat, but there is a limit to how fast it can go, all right? So depending on how much stored fat you have, it could be like 3 months to 12 months. Yeah, probably, I don't know. If you're very fat, then yeah, probably 12 months. If you're kind of chubby and you've got type 2 diabetes, maybe 6 months, maybe 4 months, somewhere around there. if you do everything perfectly, of course. If you do the fasting 4 days at a time, 5 days at a time, if you like, and you just, when you eat, like I said, like I'm going to repeat this to you over and over again. You don't eat fruit, don't eat vegetables. Vegetables will be a waste of time. Look, there's no carbs in it, so it's not like bad, but like it's not going to provide you much nutrients. Believe me, you won't absorb the nutrients from vegetables. But yeah, okay, so you look, if you want, have like some carrots or something, whatever, but don't prioritize vegetables. Prioritize meat, eggs, fish, and cheese, pretty much. That's like the key. Those are the things you want to be eating. And then, yeah, no grains, no rice, none of that. That's a waste of time, and also it will raise your insulin. Okay, like grains, like rice, for example, will raise your insulin so that you'll be storing fat, and like it's just not useful. All right, please listen when I say that, because that is a huge thing. All right, then once you're doing that, keep fasting, and then ideally as often as possible. All right, you want to be doing sprinting. If you could do it every day, go ahead. All right, because keep in mind, it's not about how good you are at sprinting, like how fast you are. It's about how much effort you're applying. If you're applying maximum effort, that is what gets you results with high intensity exercise. That's what causes a huge rise in growth hormone and adrenaline, which both burn fat. Okay, so that's what you want to be doing. It burns heaps of energy. It will increase the amount of fat you burn just on that premise alone. So that's what you want to be doing. Give it time. Repeat this over and over again. Do not stop. Do not have a fucking cookie. Do not, like, you know what I mean? Like, don't eat. If you do this, if you stick to this for the next like 6 months, you will reverse diabetes. This is how it works, all right? Because what's happening is you're basically burning through the polyunsaturated fat. Your rock bottom insulin from like most of the time. All right, this allows your pancreas to heal. This will clean out all the dead old cells that have basically been rendered useless by the reactive oxygen species. This will resensitize your muscles and your liver to insulin eventually. Yeah, just trust me, keep doing this and it'll work. Like, scientifically there is virtually no flaw in anything I said. Like, there's no better way to do this, because believe me, injecting Ozempic every fucking day or once a week or whatever, that's not going to do shit. That just makes you less hungry. All right, and that doesn't necessarily burn fat. That will make you lose muscle. Injecting insulin is probably even stupider, because you're not sensitive to insulin. Like, the reason your body's not producing insulin is because you've completely burnt out your entire pancreas and the system that it maintains. Like, you've completely destroyed it, and your body isn't listening to insulin. So injecting insulin isn't going to do shit, all right? Eating fiber is not going to do shit, because the food with most fiber is typically got lots of carbs, like oats and wheat and, like whole grain shit, like that whole grain bread. Oh, it's got so much fiber. Like, it's got so much starch. You're just going to raise your blood sugar, all right? So, once again, fucking stupid. Don't eat fruit. Yes, fruit is healthy. I'm not denying that fruit is healthy, right? I eat fruit. I eat bananas and shit. But I'm sensitive to insulin, all right? I'm perfectly healthy with regards to my blood sugar, my insulin, all of those things, metabolically healthy, all right? So if I eat carbs, my muscles absorb them and use it instantly. I store 0% fat. Like, I'm like 12% body fat right now. All right, so I'm speaking from experience here. This is real stuff. Like, if you have insulin resistance, do not bother eating any carbs, even if it's healthy, even if it's like bananas or something or whatever. Like, it does not make a difference because your body won't even benefit from the carbs. All right, it's just gonna hurt you. Okay, it'll raise your insulin. If you aren't diabetic, if say you just got insulin resistance, it'll raise your insulin, and that'll stop you from burning fat, and probably even store as fat. Okay, so look, I could keep on going, but I think you get the point. Yeah. All right. So I really hope that this video was educational to you. It taught you something, and yeah, it's probably changed your perspective on diabetes, on probably health in general, the whole world. Like, because what I just told you is also linked to so many other diseases. Like, it's actually kind of crazy. Like, I'm not going to get into that now as well, because it's already like a 30-40 minute video, but like, this is like big shit. Like, this is the secret, essentially. Okay, so if you want help from me personally, I do have a community which you can sign up for in the description. It does cost money, but I will personally coach you to get lean as quickly as possible. That's what my whole business, my YouTube channel, everything, that's what like my purpose here is to teach you and to basically make you burn body fat and get lean and healthy using science and nature. All right, this is all natural. This is all aligned with human biology and how we were evolved to live. All right, so yeah, if you want, you can subscribe or watch other videos to learn more about body fat or other things you can do to get lean. All right, I hope this helps you, and thank you for watching. Good luck, bro.